Well, China-Africa relations have obviously been around for a very long time. In particular, the shift in increasing China-Africa relations really took place around 2000, where we had the first forum on China-Africa cooperation. And through that, what has happened is the China and African countries have regularly reviewed how they work together and how the development partnership can increase. And over time, the aspects such as trade, foreign direct investment, borrowing have all increased significantly between the continent and China. As an example, China is now Africa's largest trade partner, the largest importer of African agricultural goods, a number of areas in which China was really, in some senses, far behind many other development partners in 2000, but has now become very significant in African foreign policy. I think where the ties have increased most between Africa and China are really around economics. So the relationship in terms of trade, for instance, China has imported more and more goods from African countries, and African countries the same, imported more and more from China. The other area in which there has been significant shift is on lending. Many African countries have taken the opportunity of Chinese overseas lending in order to build infrastructure at a cheaper cost than they would do otherwise, including from some of the multilaterals, especially middle-income countries. And through that, they have been able to set off a path of faster growth and to provide more benefits to citizens. That said, there's still a lot more that can be done. There's still huge development challenges on the continent. We are the region now with the largest numbers of people in poverty. So there is definitely an opportunity for that relationship to develop further, to increase. And there are also, of course, areas such as when we're talking about trade, many African countries still have a significant trade deficit with China. So how can we find a way for foreign direct investment from China, for example, to move to African countries for manufacturing, rather than be manufacturing in China and importing into Africa, actually just manufacture on the continent and establish sales there, provide jobs, and so on. So I think the third plenum happens every 5 years. It's a very important setting for China's domestic policy. And obviously, because China is a very large economy now, the second, some people say the first largest economy in the world, what happens in China affects the rest of the world. And of course, because ties between Africa and China have increased so much over the last 20, 25 years, then no doubt what happens in the third plenum, the economic decisions that China make have an implication for African countries. That said, if we're talking about the G7 countries, US, Europe, etc., many other economies are thinking, maybe this will be a problem. But for most African countries, China's economic shifts have been significantly beneficial. Even if we're thinking about China's opening up initially, the decision to use foreign exchange reserves to lend overseas, those have been beneficial for African countries. If we look at some of the more recent policies, for example, China's shift towards environmental policy, the implication for African countries is that the cost, for example, of renewables has reduced significantly. So take something like solar PV. What we've seen, the Global Solar Council talk about something called like a hockey stick. We've seen the deployment of solar PV increasing exponentially. But what's also happened is that the cost of solar PV has dropped by about 50% over the last 5 years. That means a much cheaper cost for Africans, for example, who are looking to purchase solar, for governments who are doing solar deployment, procurement schemes, and so on. So all of these developments within China, where China has innovated and has, brought the cost down, especially through extremely tough competition within China, has been beneficial. But we are, of course, the key thing for African countries, especially over the next 10 years, is really how do we drive manufacturing? How do we drive industrialization? And China is a key piece of that puzzle. So that's the thing to look out for the third plenum. how much of China's overseas, how much of China's domestic manufacturing is going to be pushed to go overseas. That's an opportunity for African countries to be part of global supply chains that we were not part of before, and we must use that opportunity.